I'm going to read one poem real quick and I'll read a story. This is an old poem, but I'm reading it because a few people in this room, I think, mentioned at one point or another that they liked it. It's called The Man with the Sad Eyes. I love your eyes, she said. They are so big and pretty and sad. I love a man with sad eyes. He smiled in reply, trying to smile a happy smile. But it was only a little bit happy. Mostly it was sad. When he spoke, his words formed little globules of sadness that floated in the air between them. Whenever he walked, he left behind him a trail of footprints made of sadness. When he touched her body, his fingers left little stains of sadness that would not wash off for weeks and weeks. Before long, she did not think his sad eyes to be so pretty anymore. She thought they were simply sad, and if there's one thing she was tired of, it was sad. So she packed her clothes, brushing the sadness off them as best she could, and took the next train to a town where her sad eyes could not see her anymore. On the train, she sat next to a man with eyes that laughed, and they talked and they smiled like long-lost friends. He touched her arm, and the sadness lifted off her like steam disappearing with the wind through the open windows, as if it was never there at all. Thanks. And that was from my book, Words for Songs I've Written, and I do have a few copies for sale. Okay, so this is a story. It's about growing up. It's the joy and adventure of growing up in Bakersfield, California. It's called The Bastards Were Everywhere and Would Endure. Bastards was what I called them. Not to their faces, mind you, but inside my head. The neighbors that surrounded my childhood home, each and every one of them. To the left of us were Barney and Shirley. Barney served in Vietnam. He owned a lot of guns and he shot neighborhood animals whenever the chance presented itself. He never wore a shirt and had an obscene beer belly that made him look like he was pregnant. He had a tattoo on each of his forearms. One was a hula maiden, and the other was an anchor that always made me think of Popeye. Barney spent most of his time standing around his garage drinking beer with the rest of the neighborhood bastards. His wife, Shirley, was nicer, but always drunk. They had a little black poodle they sometimes called Peanut, and sometimes called Poo Poo. I'm not sure if either one was its actual name, if it even had one. The dog barked constantly and often ate its own feces. Years later, after I moved away, my mom called me to tell me that Barney had taken one of his guns and shot himself in the chest. He didn't die, but he was paralyzed from the waist down. He spent the rest of his life in a wheelchair. But otherwise, things went on pretty much as before, drinking beer and hanging out in his garage with the other bastards. Shirley had to regularly soak his feet in hot water for some reason, and once when she was drunk, she boiled them. Barney didn't know at first because he couldn't feel them. It's true. True story. After that, he caught gangrene or something. I'm not sure. It's just how I remember my mom telling it to me. And then across the street, there was Jerry. He was about 40 years old, and he lived in a rundown, uncared-for house that he had inherited after his parents died or moved away. You would think the place was abandoned if not for seeing the sad ghost of Jerry haunting it from time to time. Jerry also drank a lot of beer and never wore a shirt. None of the male bastards in the neighborhood ever seemed to wear shirts. Jerry somehow avoided having much of a beer belly, I imagine because he never ate. He had shoulder-length, dirty blonde hair, and he looked like a stoner, though I think he only drank beer. He was arrested twice for riding his bicycle while drunk. Jerry was very quiet and actually nice enough, but the air of failure hung about him. It was oppressive. He used to invite me and my little brother over to his place to watch porn. We sometimes went, but we were more interested in his comic books than the porn. Jerry had a crush on my sister and would wait in the dark for her to come home from parties, from the houses of friends. He would approach her shirtless, beer in hand, and she would just pretend he wasn't there and make her way to the house as quickly as possible. Sometimes when Jerry got drunk and locked himself out of his home, he would sleep in the clubhouse that my father had built for me and my brother in our backyard. My brother would wake me up on Saturday mornings and say, "Jerry's in the clubhouse again." And the house to the right of us lived the Holsey family. Every one of them was either overweight or sickly thin. They all had bad haircuts and wore food-stained, ill-fitting clothes. And they had names like Jamie, Willard, and Mickey. Mickey was about 35 and lived in a little trailer that sat in the driveway of their lot. Mickey enjoyed tormenting me with his ugly little dog. It was some kind of Dotson mix, and they called it Sleepy. It was an old dog, sad and useless, and probably couldn't have hurt me if it wanted it to. But I was scared just the same. I was a sensitive child, afraid of dogs of all shapes and sizes, along with most other things in the world. Whenever I passed the trailer, I would make it a point to walk on the other side of the street, but Mickey would watch for me, I swear, because he had nothing else to do. When he saw me, he never failed to send the wretched little dog at me. "Get him, Sleepy, get him!" Mickey would yell with a pure and terrible joy. The thing would come yapping and snarling at me, and I would keep walking as casually as I could, doing my best to pretend I wasn't afraid. But we all knew otherwise. Me, the bastard, and his horrible little dog. The neighborhood was full of other bastards of a similar nature, not worth describing in particular detail. Eventually they all blend together, become different limbs of the same beast. The neighborhood children were, in general, cruel, ugly, dirty little creatures, miniature versions of their bastard parents. Eventually they would grow into full-size bastards themselves, beget little bastards of their own, and the horrific cycle would repeat itself endlessly. My own parents weren't so bad. They weren't particularly good as far as parents go, but they were more hapless than evil. They did what they could. My father seemed to be one of the few grown-ups in the neighborhood who wore a shirt and had a regular job. The rest of them would just sit in their garages drinking beer, bullshitting, and listening to country music. The bad redneck kind. The weeks and the months and the years passed without much happening, a general and ongoing stagnation. From time to time, one of them would die or be sent off to the county jail for a spell. But for every one that went away, there was another that took its place. The bastards were endless and eternal. But the summer I'm thinking of, I was 16 years old. The bastards are in Barney's garage, bullshitting like always. Despite the fear and hatred I harbored for them, I sometimes spent time in their company, as there was always a cooler full of beer sitting about. I would go and stand around with them for a while, pretending to listen to their conversations, long enough for me to stuff as many beers in my pockets as I could manage, before returning to my bedroom. One particular afternoon, as I was stuffing cans of Coors Light in the pockets of my denim jacket, the subject of the bastard's bullshitting was a cat, a plain, scruffy, black and white stray that wandered about the neighborhood. Barney's wife was prone to leaving the kitchen door open while she was off drinking and bullshitting, thus allowing the cat to wander inside. Shirley eventually would stumble drunk back into her bedroom to find the cat curled up asleep on her bed or a chair. For some reason I could never fully understand, the fact of the cat enraged her. She would screech and yell and throw various household objects at the creature, usually managing to chase it back outside. This particular afternoon, the unlucky feline made the mistake of crawling under the bed rather than escaping through the screen door. Shirley swore, she howled and cursed, but the cat stayed hunkered down beneath the darkness of the bed. Shirley enlisted the aid of Jerry and some of the other neighborhood bastards. They eventually got the frightened animal out of the house, but not before it had done a fair amount of pissing and fear-induced spraying. From that afternoon onwards, the cat was declared a menace by the neighborhood bastards, and its eradication became their collective mission. Barney declared he would shoot the thing, but Shirley dissuaded him, fearing another unwelcome visit from the police. She borrowed a wire mesh rabbit trap from Mickey, put an open can of sardines in it, and set it outside the screen door. The following morning, she drew aside her shades to find, to her obscene pleasure, she had indeed managed to capture the luckless beast. And how the bastards reveled in their victory. The fact that they had managed to trap a half-starved stray cat somehow gave them the feeling of rare achievement. From the drunken celebration, you would have imagined they had captured a dinosaur or a pack of wolverines. When I visited Barney's garage to investigate the commotion, all the bastards were standing about the little cage, the suffering cat inside. The prison was so small that the cat could hardly move. It could do little but sit in its own piss and shit, spitting and hissing at its tormentors. Seeing it there like that, an intense feeling of disgust and shame welled up inside me. My hatred of the bastards was a pure fire that burned deep within. A little she-bastard who lived down the street had filled a plastic beach pail with water. She was slowly making her way to the cage, saying, "Nice kitty kitty, nice kitty kitty." She stood in front of the cage, holding the pail of dirty water. I understood what she was going to do right before it was too late to stop her. She dumped the contents of the pail into the cage and onto the cat. The cat yowled and hissed, and the bastards laughed. And the little she-bastard ran back home with her empty plastic pail, screeching with glee. Eventually the bastards grew bored with the spectacle of the caged animal and wandered off into the house to watch a boxing match. I was left alone with the cat. I spoke softly to it, trying to offer what little consolation I could. It hissed and growled when I drew close, because it couldn't tell me apart from the bastards. And I wanted to tell the cat that I hated them too, that I was not of their kind. I made a silent promise to the cat. I took a few beers from the cooler and went back to my home. It was a Saturday when the bastard captured the cat, and they planned to let it sit in the cage until Monday, when the people from the SPCA or somewhere were supposed to come and take it away. I lay on the bed in my room, drinking my stolen Coors Light, thinking about the cat, mocked and tortured, guilty of nothing, waiting for an all but certain death. When night came, I waited until I was fairly sure that the bastards were asleep, and I quietly crept to where the cage sat in Barney's backyard. The cat growled softly at my approach. "Shh," I whispered. "I'm going to get you out of here, buddy." I picked up the cage and walked it quietly to where my piss-yellow Dotson sat in the driveway, the cat hissing and yowling all the while. "It's okay, buddy," I said over and over. "It's okay." I put the cage in the passenger seat and drove. The cat continued to howl. I did my best to soothe it, hoping it would somehow eventually understand that I was on its side. Our destination was a field about a mile away, across the street from the junior high school. I stopped the car and left the motor running. I took the cage to the middle of the field and tried to figure out how to open the thing. When I finally managed it, the cat cowered in the corner of the cage and hissed, still not understanding that I was trying to set it free. I finally picked up the cage and turned it sideways, dumping the cat out into the field. For a moment the cat stood motionless and dazed. It looked around the field and then at me, and then it ran very fast. When it had a fair amount of distance between us, it slowed to a trot and turned back to gaze in my direction. I imagined to see if I was getting chased. I'd like to think at this point it understood that I was a friend. I continued to trot away. It continued to trot away, and I stood and watched until it was gone. I threw the cage in a nearby trash bin and drove home, my car smelling of cat piss. The next day I woke and went outside, and the bastards were all gathered in Barney's garage, heatedly discussing the disappearance of the cats. "Hey, Billy," Jerry called as I walked to my car. "Do you know what happened to that goddamn cat?" I rightly figured I would be first on their list of suspects, as they knew that I knew they were bastards. And they rarely spoke to me unless it was to accuse me of something. "I don't know," I said. The bastards stared, not believing it for a second. I kept walking. "It was a mean cat," Jerry eventually said. "It peed all over Shirley's bed." "Yeah," I said, getting into my car. I imagined all the neighborhood bastards in their own personal little cages, wallowing in their own filth. I drove away, my car the color of piss and still smelling of it. Even at that age, I didn't believe in any particular God, but I said a little prayer for the cat and wished it better luck with the rest of its time upon the earth. The bastards were everywhere and would endure, but we do what we can. Thank you.